Well, hello, we're continuing here at Duncannon Fort with Paul, and Paul's a wealth of knowledge here about the fort, so he's going to give us a wee bit more of that knowledge.
Well, I tell you something, this is my favourite building in the fort, okay, my favourite part of the fort. And it's just what you mentioned about ingenuity and the history of building in military installations. And this building here, the first thing you notice about it is the walls are splayed outwards. There's two slits in the walls here, and we see a pitched roof. But if we come on inside, which we've only had access to for the past 12 months or so, we see a different picture. Follow me, guys.
Oh, I didn't expect this. I actually thought it was going to be a house, like, you know.
There we go. So now the first thing I can say to you is, right, one, look at the floor. It's bone dry, absolutely tinder dry. These holes in the wall are not in line with the ones you saw from the outside. So what they've done is they've created differences in air pressure along the wall so that you get a draft. And that draft is circulating around the whole room. Basically, this is 16th century air conditioning.
Yeah, you can feel it.
And above your heads, the pitched roof we saw outside, underneath here is a beautiful barrel vaulted ceiling.
It would remind you of a cellar in this one.
Well, I was thinking of a wine cellar myself.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's lime washed, and lime wash is, I can never remember the word, it's aquasonic, right? Basically it sucks the moisture out of the air, right? It's not aquaphobic because that's a fear of water, I know that one, but, right? And it's arched like this. And if you put those things together, you get some idea of the purpose of the building. And the purpose of the building is, this is the magazine. This is where you stored anything that went bang. And God forbid that something did go bang, the walls which are splayed outwards would pop up because of the nature of them. That would bring down the ceiling, and in between the ceiling, between this barrel vaulted ceiling and the pitched roof, is full of sand. So that sand would come down and extinguish any fire that you've seen or caused. So this, guys, this is a 16th century fire suppression system. And it's still in perfect condition because it's been bone dry.
Is this the original door?
It's not the original door, okay, so you can ignore that. It's right. We'll cut that bit out. Right. It is a door, but it's not the original door for this side. You can see where all the shelving was and the different levels for storing different types of gunpowder and cannonball. Not so much the ball, but the charges and the powder would have been in here. The ball would be in the armory, right? And the actual weapons, the muskets and the cannons. This is where stuff that goes bang was kept, right? 500 years ago. And they thought of this kind of design. And again, this idea of the aircon, as I call it, I know it's not air conditioning, but the idea is you could have a lantern in here around the corner and have light coming in, because you'd never come in here with a candle. No. You know what I mean? So there was safety there in illuminating the room in the same way. And, yes, I'm a big fan of this particular room, I have to say.
Well, hello, thank you for joining me today again on the Church History Trail. We're continuing here in Duncannon Fort, and we're going to pick Paul's brain a wee bit more. So you're going to tell us about King James.
Well, exactly. All right. As I said to you, this is the third occasion when I'm going to brag about the fort and tell you you're not dealing with muck now, right? You're dealing with brass here. First one was Michelangelo. Second one, Hollywood. This is talk of King James. And we know that in the 17th century, there was a great European conflagration which ended with the Battle of the Boyne, when the Catholic King James was defeated by the Protestant King William of Orange. And after that battle, King James II ran away, right? And he came here to Duncannon. And he was here for 3 or 4 days or so, waiting to get a boat, waiting until the weather was right, to get out to Kinsale and then into exile in France. And he had to escape, and we talked about that a little while ago, King James's Hole, as it's called. But while he was here, he wrote letters. And at the heading of the letters, he wrote, "From our royal fort of Duncannon." So excuse me, we've got a rubber stamp from the British royal family saying this is a royal fort. Now to add to that, King William of Orange chased him. And King William came here. And he got stuck here for 3 weeks because the weather was so bad. You'd know it was July, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right? And he also wrote letters, and he also wrote from our royal fort of Duncannon. So now we've got 2 English kings giving us the royal seal of approval. I can tell you, you're not dealing with muck now, guys.
You're near on the same level then as Royal Hillsborough.
Exactly. There we go. Guys, this building behind you, right, you can see it also has the splayed walls that we talked about, right? Because this was the armory. The other building we've just come out of is the magazine, where things that go bang. But this is the armory. So this would have had 2 huge, big double doors on front of it. You can almost see the markings of them now, because you'll be driving horses and carriages in here with cannons, right, and cannon things. And then the armourers would work on the munitions and things in that building there. It has the same fire suppressant scheme as the magazine does. And this was the armourer's house. And this is Elizabethan. So we know this one dates back to the 1500s or the late 1500s, right? Whereas the rest of the buildings you're looking at now, right, are the late 1700s, early 1800s. So it's Georgian in their era, right? There's very little left of Elizabethan except that. This was, as I said, the barracks, right? And nobody said military life is fair, okay? It's inequitable, right? Because 128 men lived in the regiment. But their officers, 28 men, lived in that lovely Georgian house over there. They had better food, they had better conditions, and maybe their wives with them and so on. But one up from them was the governor. And he lived in that house there. Just one guy. Now, obviously, he had his retinue and he had his civil servants and so on with him, so it's a bit of a stretch to say just one guy lived in the house.
I'll see a date on that if you want to zoom up.
Well, the date dates to 1943, and that's because in 1922, when the British left, they took everything with them, right? They stripped it bare, all the munitions, everything, right? Pretty much the furniture, okay? But then, of course, we had a civil war here. And the anti-treaty movement, I suppose the forerunners of the IRA, they came in here because it was easy to defend, it was natural, it was a fort, and they set up camp as such in here, a garrison in here, right? But as you know, they lost the civil war, okay? So on their departure from here, they set fire to it. And this was a symbol of British imperialism, okay? And up there would have been the British Crown symbol. So that was the first thing to go, all right? Definitely. And over here in the corner was the Wesleyan Chapel.
Oh, was
and of
that
course,
the Wesleyan Chapel?
being the IRA, they burnt that down straight away. Protestant church, that was gone too, all right? So this house was built a little bit later. So they left 1922, and the place went into disrepair and ruin. But in 1940, Hitler bombed a little village here called Camp Isle. It's about 10 miles away, and we'll talk a lot about that in a little while when we look at the anti-aircraft batteries. Cool. Yes, exactly. But in response to that, the Irish forces, the Irish army, came back in here to set up an anti-aircraft battery, right? And they came in, and of course the first thing they did was put modern roofs on, a lot of asbestos at the time, okay? New Georgian, Edwardian, is all covered in this horrible grey pebble dash, right? But it's 80 years ago now, and that pebble dash has worked itself into the structures of the building. So to take it off would cause more damage than to leave it where it is. Now, of course, what they did was took down any British insignia and put up the Irish crest of the armed forces, or the PDF, which is the Fianna Fáil, and that's when they did it in 1943.
And you mentioned the asbestos. Of course, asbestos is fireproof, so that's why
we'll use it a lot. Yeah, this roof here is. That's why this building actually isn't part of the current renovation project, because the roof, there's too much asbestos in the roof to take out.
Of course, asbestos doesn't do any harm unless it's disturbed.
Well, I don't want to put that to the test. Because this building over here is called the Burke's House, right? And this was built by the Irish Army in the 1940s. And you'll see that it's 3 feet above the ground, whereas the rest of the houses are on the ground. And the reason for that is this was the site, as I said, of the chapel, and there would have been a small graveyard attached to the chapel. Now, that was not for soldiers killed in warfare or anything like that. It was soldiers who died of disease or accidents and so on. So there wouldn't be that many. But one of them has an inscription on the gravestone. And that inscription is exactly the same as the inscription that's on William Shakespeare's gravestone, which is, "Blessed be the hands that laid this stone, but cursed be the hands that moved the bones." So they didn't. They just built the house above the graveyard, built it 3 feet up, so the graveyard is perfectly preserved underneath the house. So I did tell you there was one, but you weren't going to see it. Part of the current renovation plan is to demolish that house because it's not part of the original fort. Now, there's a school of thought myself of which is to leave it. It's 80 years old. It is part of the history of the fort.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But what I'd love to see is they put a glass floor into it,
You can see
so
through.
that we could see down into the
Okay.
graveyard if we could.
And I see a cannon there as well.
This cannon we'll come round to. We're going to make our way back around to
No
it.
worries.
It's a replica. We have real ones. We've 7 genuine, real 18th century cannons, but they're currently being renovated, being restored. They're getting new gun carriages built for them. So unfortunately, you've just missed those.
No worries.
They will be back later in the summer, but they look just, well, they're nice and shiny and black, but they look just like that, which are smaller ones, right? Okay, those cannons will be for killing people, right? So now, guys, this is a secondary part here. If you step onto the step here and look over the wall, what you'll see is the harbour, right? Which is the only place that shipping can land equipment and horses and cannons and so on. Men could be landed on the beach on the other side of the fort, okay, if they were attacking the fort, but equipment couldn't. So this, where we're standing now, is a mortar establishment, and there would be 4 large mortars here, and you can see the base of one left here, the rails, okay? And mortars fire shells, and shells are thin metal, filled metal balls filled up with all kinds of nasty rusty nails and broken glass and so on, and gunpowder. And then with a string or a fuse attached, we'd light the fuse, put the shell into the large mortar cannon. It would lob it up in the air to land on the harbour, or land on any shipping, and then the shell would explode, sending out all kinds of nasty shrapnel into the crew and sailors that were left. The second Martello tower I mentioned is up in the trees, up here. Again, its role was to defend that side of the fort, the landward side. You can see
Yeah, right there.
That's why that hasn't been touched.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmare. Now, guys, I mentioned it in the movie clip, and we'll talk about it again. This is Second World War, right? Now, I know you all read signs, you know, no parking after 5 o'clock, double yellow lines, gates closed at 5, none of which you all ignore, but this one is important. Please mind your head as you come in, okay? Guys, there we go, all right? Now, like I say, not Elizabethan, not Georgian, not Victorian, Second World War. And the reason for this, and this whole anti-aircraft battery down here, is because of the aforementioned bombing of Camp Isle. Now, Ireland was neutral in the Second World War, and yet it was bombed on a number of occasions. And there are 3 different theories as to why Camp Isle got bombed. The creamery, or the cooperative in Camp Isle. And the first one is that the 2 bombers that came here were lost, okay? And really that theory doesn't hold a lot of credence. One is, for one reason, they came past the Hook Lighthouse there, and on the Hook Lighthouse was a massive, great big sign that said "Era." So these pilots should have seen that to say you're entering neutral era. Secondly, all the contemporary witness accounts talk about the bombers coming directly at 50 feet above the water. So we're nearly 80 or 90 feet above the water now. So we'd be looking down at the bombers from this point. So, which is weird, because if you're lost in an aeroplane, you go up, look for landmarks. But these guys were way down low, coming in along the river. So again,
You nearly think they were sneaking in.
You'd be convinced they're sneaking in. It's not just nearly think it, I can tell you, right? Now, in the distance over here, you can see smoke coming out of a chimney, right? And that smoke is coming from a chimney which is in Bellevue Port, which is effectively the port of Waterford. So it would have been an important trading point, right? It's actually in County Kilkenny, which is just confusing. But anyway, it's the port of Waterford. So these planes came up here, and they came around the bend up there where the 3 rivers, the 3 sisters, meet. Okay? And there's a power station there called Great Island. And Great Island has 2 chimneys. And at that point, the guys turned right and offloaded their bombs fairly shortly after that onto the village of Camp Isle, right? Killing 3 young ladies. So there's always a sad part of these things. It's truth, right? Luckily, according to the stone I read in Camp Isle, it was a beautiful summer's day. The sun was shining, and all the other staff were on a lunch break and had gone outside for a picnic for lunch. Right? Normally, if it had been a wet day or a dark day, they'd have been in the canteen, and it was actually the canteen that got hit by the bombs, and it was 3 canteen workers that were killed. Right? So, some things are bright shining. Now, the second theory, this is the one for the guys with the internet with the tinfoil on their heads, right? Okay, is that this happened shortly after Dunkirk, and that an awful lot of British POWs were taken at Dunkirk, and in their packs, right, was Irish creamery butter from Campoil, County Wexford. Which, of course, is nonsense, all right? Well, there was butter. We did supply the British Army, but we also supplied the German Army, the Abwehr, right? So he wouldn't bomb the creamery to stop us supplying because he was stopping his own soldiers getting butter. So it doesn't really hold any credence whatsoever. Also, again, you guys will know, there's no way bombers were that accurate, right? To hit the creamery in a small village in County Wexford wasn't going to happen, right? My theory on that is that they missed, right? And what their actual target was Waterford. And was that chimney, the port of Waterford. So at the Great Island chimneys, they had mistaken the chimneys and gone the wrong way. All right. And my reason that they wanted to bomb, now I have no proof for this. This is not documented, right? I have to say that very quickly, caveats. But there is some documentation to support this theory, right? Is that at the time, Churchill wanted the use of our western ports. The Battle of the Atlantic was going on, and if the Royal Navy could restock and rearm in Galway or in Foynes or in Cork, it was like take 6 days off their journey of going to Southampton or Plymouth to do it, right? Which means they could be more effective back out in the Atlantic. And that Churchill had approached De Valera with a carrot and a stick to enable this to happen, right? But now we had only just got those ports back. We'd only had independence for a few years. We'd only declared a republic a few years, and we'd got the ports back within 1936, I think. I'm not sure, mid-1930s anyway, right? So it would have been an anathema to the Irish people to have the Royal Navy back in the ports again, right? They just wouldn't have stood for it. But and De Valera, of course, knew that. But what he was also offered by Churchill was to reunite with the 6 counties, right? And this was a massive carrot for him. He'd fought for republicanism, 32 County Republic in 1916 and so on, right, in the War of Independence. So this was a big carrot for him. But at some stage, spies and whatever, the Germans have got wind of this deal to be done, right? And they sent a warning message to Dev. Right? Guys, we know you're neutral. We'll respect your neutrality. But if you do not remain neutral, you give the British the use of the island, and give the British use of ports, we can reach you. You are bombable. So he hit the port, well, I think, the port of Waterford. They missed. They hit the port of Waterford. He hit the port of Dublin. They bombed on the North Strand, right? Hit the port of Dundalk and Drogheda, right? All these ports, right? And more importantly, the big one for me is they bombed the Phoenix Park, which is where De Valera lived. So we're really getting a message home to you here now, guys. So as a result of that, then the Irish Army came in and built these processes here. This was for a searchlight, okay? And the searchlight would have gone straight out the channel here, out towards the lighthouse, past Cregan Head, which is where the slavery trade was here. The pirates would come from there, from the Barbary coast. And then, as I say, there's this battery down here, which would have been there from early times. A battery was there, early times, Elizabethan times, and we can see the wall back over here on your left. But in the Second World War, then they replaced it with this bunker and the anti-aircraft pods. People say it looks like Teletubby Land. I don't know, right? Okay, so welcome back again, guys. Where we're standing now is the business end. This fort was designed for defence from the sea. Okay, the stuff we've looked at so far has been defence from land, which was the secondary purpose of the fort. What we have here are big cannons, all right? And the fulcrum is at the back. And these are on rails, these carriages, so that you can track a ship as it passes. And there was 3 of them here. And these would have had a range of about 2.5 miles and fired a ball of about 30 pounds, right? So you could easily hit the people who lived in that village over there, right? Take those houses out. And that happens to be the village of Crook. And next to it is the village of Passage East, where the little car ferry goes from. And we've Woodstown. This is all the Munster coastline here. Now, these cannons were actually fired in anger on one occasion because there was a civil war in England, right, in the 1640s, 1650s. Oliver Cromwell, King Charles I, all right? And the only regicide, Cromwell won, killed the king, right? Not a great thing to do, but he did it. Right? And the garrison that was here at the time, their regiment would have been traditionally a royalist regiment. Now, they then became part of the New Model Army after the Cromwellian victory, but their hearts, I think, still were royalist. Okay, because that comes into the story in a little bit, because at the time of the Civil War, the Catholic bishops in the House of Lords all left because they knew Cromwell wouldn't support them. They came over here to Ireland and they set up a new government called the Confederacy. I was in the city of Kilkenny, and Kilkenny became the capital city of Ireland at the time. That's where the government sat, the Confederacy. And that Confederacy raised an army, the Confederate Army. And that army, and Americans get confused at this bit, it's not their Confederate Army, it's our Confederate Army, right? But that Confederate Army came here and laid siege to this fort to get the fort back from the British, okay?
So was it Cromwellian troops who were here during that time?
They were British troops. Okay, now Cromwell had won the Civil War, so yes, you could say they were Cromwellian, but my theory is that their loyalty was still royalist, okay, because they didn't put their heart into it. This battle that happened, not enough people were killed. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, but if you look at the statistics for it, right, you saw how impregnable the fort is. Those lunettes, those tunnels, those man traps, the bridge. You'd think this would take a lot of loss of life to take, but in fact there was very little loss of life. Right? So I have a feeling that the commanders here said, we're in a foreign country, we lost the war, do we care? Do we heck? Here's the keys, lads, I'm off, right? And I think that's what... Now, people did die. I shouldn't in any way belittle that the people did die. There was a battle, right? But not nearly as effective as you'd think it would be, which is why I think there was this kind of royalist thinking in the troops that were here. But the point of the story is that gave the Irish access to these armaments. Now, Cromwell had planned to take Waterford, and the way to take it was to come in by sea. Bring your army in by sea and get to Waterford. But now he had a problem, because this fort was manned by Irish soldiers who were going to shoot at any ships that came in. So he sent over his flagship, the Great Lewis, with an admiral on board and 2 support vessels to take this fort back at all costs or by any means. That's important to my story, I'll say that again, right? At all costs or by any means. See where this is going, right? And anyway, the Great Lewis arrives around the headland there where the Hook Lighthouse is. Starts coming up the channel, and you can see the channel nowadays is clearly marked with the buoys. The 2 great cannons at the front of the fort here that fired 80-pound balls with 100-pound charges, so they made a huge noise, and these 80-pound balls will be firing and making a massive thing, so the 2 support vessels turned and ran away. The Admiral kept coming. And he gets past the 2 big cannons at the front, and now these 3 that we're standing on start firing on him as he's going past us here. And that red marker over there marks the wreck of the Great Lewis that was discovered in 2002. Now, I might be a little bit off with that, but there you go, that's what it is. Right? Now the guys boarded the vessel. Right? Unfortunately, the crew were killed, the Admiral was taken, and with him was his papers. Now he should have lined them with lead, thrown them in the river, but he didn't. And they were taken. And now Cromwell has a problem, because the Irish army, the Confederate army, has access to his entire plans for the attack of Waterford that this admiral had. So he has to think about it and think about changing his mind or not. But in it, though, in these papers, is some correspondence between the admiral and Oliver Cromwell. And Oliver Cromwell has said to the admiral, I need you to get to Duncannon Fort and get that fort back at all costs or by any means. And the admiral says, I will do that, my Lord Protector, whatever the title would be, right? No problem whatsoever, except I haven't got a clue where Duncannon is. Right? And Cromwell says, there's no problem. You'll find it very easily. You'll come into the Waterford estuary and you make sure you come in by hook or by crook. Very good. So to get something done at all costs or by any means is to get it done by hook or by crook.
Very good, excellent.
There you go.
That's the origin of that.
That's the... So in order to secrete King James out of the fort and away from the prying eyes, this tunnel was dug, right, down to what is now that anti-aircraft battery that you saw from the searchlight. And then a boat could come alongside here at night, and King James could be secreted out to Kinsale, where he then went into exile in France.
He would have made his way down here then.
He would have walked down this very tunnel that you're walking down now, right?
And would King William have left by this entrance as well?
No, because King William would have come to the harbour, right?
Yes.
and he would have left by the harbour. There was no price on his head, right?
Yes.
He was the king. So this guy was running away, secreting away, right? Now we can only get to a certain point here, okay? But down here is where the boat would have docked alongside, and this is where we call King James's hole, for lack of a better term, because he would have been secreted down here and out there and onto a boat and away.
Very good.
And if you look behind you, you've got some nice views here.
And also I see a wee cubby hole in there. I hope there's nobody in there.
No, there's no access, right?
You got a colour?
Yeah.
Brilliant.